I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Wednesday, March the 13th. Back from Houston Stock Show, saw several feeder flash viewers while I was down there. A lot of you asked how we did. It was a beating. We did terrible. It was a complete money pit, waste of time and money and effort, but it's just a victim of having beginner's luck. 2 years ago, we first got back to Texas and I had kids to show. We went down there not knowing what in the world to do and placed 2 out of 3, and that was worse than a young bull rider covering his first bull, because it got it in our blood and we kept wanting to go back. But back up here in the Texas Panhandle now, and I tell you what, everything has changed. All of a sudden it's gotten wet as it's been everywhere all winter long. It has been bone dry in the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles, and you couldn't have scooped enough snow together to get a cup full of water that we've had this winter, and no rain at all. Well, it started raining. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but late Tuesday night it is pouring outside. It's going to be a godsend to these guys that's got wheat that's played out. They still had cattle turned out there, but just feeding them on the wheat, on what used to be wheat, but you can't see anything out there now. But if they get them off of there and they don't trudge it out, get some warm days and sunshine, could come back. It'll help for the grass in this area, and finally got some wetness in this part of the country, because everywhere else has been wet but been bone dry here. But let's look at what's going on so far this week. We've got the basis back, but at what cost? Guys complaining and been hard for hedged feeders to try to get any kind of basis. Well, the board's been down hard the first of this week, and we're back to a positive basis, but at what cost? We've lost our market position now, and we can pretty much say in the spring of early spring of 2019, our market topped out at 128, which most people thought it would be at least 10 bucks higher than that. But if you watch me, we've preached and preached at all the failures that cattle feeders have had in trying to obtain any kind of market position, and all the different kind of schemes that the packers have used to keep it down. And it's just another failure in what looks to be kind of a downtrodden deal here, buying feeder cattle in a competitive market and selling fat cattle in one that's not competitive. Lost another regional packer in Iowa there to one of the big 4 owned by foreign interests, and it just doesn't look very good. And if you've been to any of my talks, you remember in 1998 the hog packers decided that there was no need to have independent hog producers, and they rubbed them completely out. And I hope that doesn't happen with the cattle, but I guarantee you they're sure getting vulnerable enough to have to make it work. But let's look at the board early in the week here. On Tuesday, April live cattle futures down hard, down $2.35 at 126.65. June was down $1.57 at 118.67. Your out fronts were also lower, but not as sharply as your nearbys. But looking pretty tough, and we talked about how big the open interest is. A lot of people holding contracts in that live cattle deal, but a lot of them were managed money speculators, and they were on the long side, and they're starting to feel things slip, and it's just like a house of cards. They will jump. If they won't ride it down on the long side, they'll flip around and they'll try to short it and ride it down and gain that away. And that's the way they operate. So it's a real slippery slope whenever you're kind of ganged up with a lot of managed money speculators and hoping for them to hold the market together, because they won't. They will run. And I feel like, and everybody else does too, that's what's happening right now, even though we thought we could gain a little bit more. But it looks like, your market is topped out for the spring, for right now anyway. March feeder cattle down $1 at 141.30. April down 157 at 144.40. Your fat cattle trade. Let's look at your wrap up for last week. Your weighted average on last week's negotiated fat cattle trade in your 5 area feeding region had a total volume of 65,300. This is the time of year where they normally get real aggressive. So you compare that 65,300 to the same week a year ago, it was nearly 125,000. So people weren't too excited about doing that. And in nationwide trade, including outside the 5 areas, was 82,300 head. Of that, 31% or 25,300 were for the 15 to 30 day delivery. So we see that building back up again as those guys, the packers, are trying to get as many cattle as they can out here into late March, early April, and just make it definite that we won't have any more of an uprising in the market. But you look at your weighted average in the 5 area feeding region last week was 128.15. That was actually down 7 cents compared to the weighted average from the previous week. And your dressed steer weighted average was 205.07, exactly steady or unchanged, and you don't see that very often. But you look at so far this week, on Tuesday morning we started seeing a little bit of more trade up in the northern plains, of course, as guys saw that the board was down so hard that they're going to get a positive basis, but they're losing market position at the same time as hard as the board's been down, barely clinging on to any basis. In Iowa, confirmed sales 5,800 head on Tuesday, anywhere from 126 to 128. Those guys that pulled the plug at 126, they didn't have much basis there, or actually didn't have any at all, depending on what time of the day they sold. But a lot of 127, some 128. Your dress trade was where most of the action is. It ranged from 202 to 205, but mostly 204. But the mud is back. I mean, we talked about we were freeze-dried there, as cold and miserable as it had been here for the last several weeks. It had been so consistently cold that you didn't have much thawing, and it didn't seem too awful bad. Well, now the temperatures have moderated. Now we're starting to see this mud, and it's hard to believe how much moisture is in that ground in those lots. When it starts warming up, the bottom just drops out of it. And that's where we're at again, as we were in the fall, is we've got mud, and it's going to take a long time for it to thaw, dry out, and ever get a bottom to it again. And so that's going to add tag to your hides, and then that's going to make your dressing percentages go down big again, which, the packers ought to give more than what they've been given dressed, but they're not going to add to the market. And your farmer feeders and your guys that are less informed up in the northern plains, they're just going to fall victim to that, taking less money and having lower dressing percentage on the dress market. Nebraska sold a few cattle, around 1,000 head on Tuesday, that were confirmed. We'd heard rumors of more than that. We'll see if those come to fruit in later reports, but confirmed on mandatory price reporting, 1,000 head, 126 and 204 in Nebraska. Box beef cutout values, last week's wrap up, your average trade for last week on choice cuts was $224.94. That was up nearly $5 from the previous week. And your selects $218.14, up $3.50 from the previous week. And it just seems like always, it's just always a downer for the cattle feeder, and it's always just gangbusters for the packing industry. And it looks like they're going to have another year of barely having any days in the red, let alone any quarter in the red. But already starting out this week, your cutout values on the spot market and Tuesday afternoon sharply higher than those quotes I gave you, which was the average trade for last week. And so they're taking advantage of all this great demand we've got and the heavy volume of sales that we've seen on our dressed beef market. But your cattle feeders are not able to take advantage of it at all, and probably if we continue in this rate, your cattle feeders will break another record, as last year they broke the record of getting the smallest percentage of the retail market, and then they may even get a smaller percentage this year if we continue to do things the way we have. But that's depressing enough. Let's talk about something else. How about some feeder cattle? Hey, that's fun to talk about. Lots of competition. You got lots of buyers and lots of sellers, and a competitive way to market them, mostly through an auction. and who'd have thunk that'd be the best way to sell cattle. But how about Oklahoma City, Oklahoma National Stockyards on Monday? 14,750 head. Nice big sale for the old National Stockyards. Love to see that. Still your nation's feeder cattle market early in the week. But you remember the previous week they didn't have a very big run because it was so bitterly cold, so they had this big run this week. And the market compared to 2 weeks ago, feeders were mostly steady to as much as $4 lower, calves $2 to $7 lower. And you got to hate it for the guys that were planning on selling a week ago when it was so cold, because they probably would have got a lot better market than they did this week. But due to the board and due to the activities, due to the failure to gain any ground in the fat cattle trade, just took a lower hit this week. Joplin Regional Stockyards on Monday, 8,600 head. They were the same boat, and it was really cold up there. But compared to 2 weeks ago, your market in Joplin was steady to $3 higher. The improved weather there brought some of your local backgrounders into the market, so that was pretty good. Look at some sales on Tuesday. OKC West, good run of calves, 4,000 head there, but of course with the board down and everything being kind of downer, even though on improved weather, your calves $2 to $5 lower, except for some 5-weight heifers, and they were mostly steady. Had some buying power come in on those. Another big sale on Tuesday. Winter Livestock Auction, Winter Live in La Junta, Colorado, had their 79th anniversary sale. Now that's amazing. Right there, you know, and there's not a heck of a lot going on in La Junta anymore. And they've got another sale right across the street. And to have a 79th anniversary sale for Winter Live in La Junta, that's really a mark that is admirable, and I hope they get another 79 years, because that's lonely country rare in the dry, ugly part of Colorado. But you got local producers there to support their auction markets and can make a business thrive for that many years. But had a big run there for the anniversary sale. Nothing like a free lunch to bring guys in, and they had one of those on Tuesday in La Junta. But look at the calf prices. Look at this market report. It's the only one that was available Tuesday night. Was Cattle Market Central market report there, and you see that the best tested weights was on 5 weights, both steers and heifers, and pretty impressive prices there on grazing type stocker calves. 1,191 steer calves in the 5s averaged 548 at 184.04 on the average. That was up almost $5 compared to the previous week. And the 5-weight heifers, 1,350 of them, averaged 544 at 162.13, and that was up over $7 on the weighted average from the previous week. And yeah, of course your heavier weights were mostly lower, and you know that's going to happen when we've had things happen like on the board early this week like we've seen. But yeah, your best test was on those calf weights, and they sell good. There'll be a lot of good grazing in and around that part of the country too this spring. But look at an individual quote there out of La Junta on some calves. 117 head, weighed 523 pounds at 196. That's a pretty fancy quote there on some steer calves there in La Junta, Colorado. Another good sale on Tuesday. Philip, South Dakota, 2,900 head there at Philip the Giant. They're not having their biggest sales this time of year, but they can still sell them. The market reporter there called the market sharply lower than the last sale 2 weeks ago. And it's easy to believe that it would be sharply lower than 2 weeks ago. But look at this big quote on there that doesn't look too awful bad. 145 head of 816 pound steers in Philip bring 144.50. And that's your feeder flash for Wednesday.